It is smokescreen season in the NFL, and we're getting a variety of credible reports about what the Chicago Bears are going to do with their quarterback situation. We'll sift through what's real and what might just be a public leverage play on the podcast today.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On the show today, we check in on the latest reports around the favorite frontrunner team to land Justin Fields and the particular interest from the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. We'll check in on discussions the Chicago Bears have had about maybe drafting a quarterback and holding on to Justin Fields, at least for this season, having both quarterbacks entering training camp. And then also the reports of the Bears needing a historic haul to be able to move them off of the number one overall pick. But a team like Commanders, the Washington Commanders, apparently may be willing to offer some kind of historic haul. And we'll kind of go through which of these reports means anything and matters, and which maybe is a little bit more offseason smoke that doesn't have a lot of fire behind it. The big one, though, is the landing spot for Justin Fields, because this is the kind of news that moves the odds at sportsbooks like FanDuel, where currently the betting favorite for where Justin Fields will play in 2024 has jumped up to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Bears are still second in those odds, and then I think Atlanta is 3, and then a number of other teams beyond that. But the way odds makers see it, Pittsburgh is the most likely place that Justin Fields will play next season, in perhaps large part because of something ESPN's Adam Schefter said on the Pat McAfee show. I don't know if that was over the weekend. I don't remember exactly what day of that quote came out, but the quote from Adam Schefter was, quote, "We know that Pittsburgh is going to go out and get some type of quarterback, whether that's Ryan Tannehill, whether that's Russell Wilson, whether that's Justin Fields. I know Mike Tomlin's a big fan of Justin Fields. We'll keep that in mind during the offseason and the coming weeks." So all of a sudden you have head coach of a team that has publicly said, we would like to pursue a veteran quarterback this offseason, now by a credible source of ESPN's Adam Schefter reporting that Mike Tomlin really likes Justin Fields. Now that does not mean the Steelers are going to bend heaven and earth to go get Justin Fields and give the Chicago Bears some kind of, over-the-top massive trade haul offer, but it certainly does lend some credence to the Steelers being the favorite there, and the sports books have largely adapted and adjusted to that line. Now, we've also had the NFL Network insiders have again connected the Atlanta Falcons as a team that they say people around the NFL believe the Falcons will be interested in Justin Fields. There was a piece written by, I think it was a combination of like Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo and Tom Pelissaro. So it's not like attributable to one of them particularly, but comes from, again, reputable sources. This is not guy on Twitter tweets, "Hey, Mike, I heard Mike Tomlin loves Justin Fields," but it's like, no, ESPN's Adam Schefter says Mike Tomlin loves Justin Fields. And I don't see any reason not to believe Adam Schefter, and I certainly think it makes the Pittsburgh Steelers the favorites. I think these things are all true and things that we can put in our bag and account for. Like, yes, these are things we should accept. But at the same time, whenever we get reports like this in the offseason, and this is going to be the theme for today's podcast as we get through some of the other reports, the first question, or the most important question, maybe not the first question, but the most important question you have to ask yourself is, especially when it comes from an Adam Schefter or an Ian Rappaport, who benefits the most from this specific piece of information being put out there? Because that's probably going to be the source that provided it for the insider to put out there. Like, for example, I don't think Mike Tomlin or the Pittsburgh Steelers benefits in any way from Adam Schefter publicly saying Mike Tomlin loves Justin Fields. This does not sound like information that came from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So who benefits from people thinking, from the world knowing that Mike Tomlin likes Justin Fields, or at least putting the information out there? Seems like the Bears are the team that benefits the most there, because it tells the rest of the NFL, hey, there is a team out here that has a reasonably strong connection to want Justin Fields. There's your competition. If you want Justin Fields, you're competing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here is some reported public interest in Justin Fields. Raise that price tag. Get your best offers ready, because the Steelers will like him. Now, that's not to say that Ryan Poles is the one who called up Adam Schefter and said, hey, Adam, put it out there that Mike Tomlin likes Justin Fields. Adam Schefter may very well know for a fact that Mike Tomlin likes Justin Fields. Maybe that's just not a well-kept secret, that around the draft, everyone knew Mike Tomlin wanted Justin Fields or something along those lines. Like, it doesn't have to be intentionally placed out there by the Bears. And I take it to be true and accurate, but I do think it's something that benefits the Bears from a trade market standpoint. So you kind of have to approach it that way with, okay, why is Adam Schefter putting that out there? Who would provide that to Adam Schefter? Who would benefit by Adam Schefter putting it out there? And to me, it's the Bears drumming up more trade interest in Justin Fields and trying to get that price tag higher. Because it's not the only report that I think falls into that category of benefits the Bears from a trade market standpoint that has already been making the headlines and circulating the social media conversation. Because we also heard from Adam Schefter about the Bears considering other plans for Justin Fields that I think most people find a little bit less believable, but it doesn't mean it's not still worth talking about and still worth dissecting. And I still think it should be believable as something that the Bears absolutely should consider, maybe keeping Justin Fields and drafting Caleb Williams. We'll go through the reporting on that and certainly some of the pros and cons and challenges involved with a process like that, and why the Bears might want that information out there next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So if your bet wins on whatever you want to bet $5 on, you'll get that winnings for your $5 bet, plus $150 added to your account. Even though the Super Bowl is over, football season's in the rearview mirror, you could still bet on NFL draft props and a ton of other football bets throughout the offseason, or you've got the NBA season, the NHL season, baseball is right around the corner, golf, soccer, hockey, tennis, I mean, you name it, they have it at FanDuel, and there's a bunch of different ways to play. So if you want to claim your $150 in bonus bets, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA and NFL. So Justin Fields to the Pittsburgh Steelers seems to have some real legs there. Again, not guaranteed it's going to happen. It's worth noting in that Adam Schefter quote, he also mentioned Ryan Tannehill and Russell Wilson. And I've heard from people around Pittsburgh that Arthur Smith would like to bring Ryan Tannehill to Pittsburgh, but in the same way that Mike Tomlin would like to bring Justin Fields to Pittsburgh, that doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it certainly is something that they're going to be interested in. Adam Schefter also had another report on, I think it was one of the NFL Countdown or NFL Live shows from the Super Bowl over the weekend, with another really interesting report involving the Bears and Justin Fields that would seem to, at the very least, attempt to try and drum up trade interest and increase the kind of value the Bears could get for trading someone like Justin Fields. And on this show, Adam Schefter said, quote, they, referring to the Bears, they have talked about the idea, as unlikely as it seems, of carrying both quarterbacks. taking the guy at 1 and keeping Fields. Now, will they get to that? It's hard to imagine that. But that is a conversation that's come up within the organization. And I feel, again, similarly to the Mike Tomlin quote where I believe Adam Schefter. Like, if you look at specifically what he's saying there, he is not reporting that the Bears are going to keep Fields and draft Caleb Williams. All he's saying is actually a very small thing. All he's saying is they have had conversations at Hallis Hall about what it would be like or whether it would be advantageous for them to keep Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams and carry both quarterbacks into this season. That idea of they had conversations about it can mean a lot of different things, though. That could be as simple as, hey, do you think there's a chance we could keep both quarterbacks? No. Okay, never mind. Good. End of conversation. That's that. Or it could be a more in-depth, like, okay, we need to cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's and kind of run through every scenario here. And maybe Ryan Poles sits down with Matt Eberflus, with new offensive coordinator Shane Waldron, new quarterbacks coach Kerry Joseph, and says, okay, guys, we're trying to work through all the possibilities here. What do you think it would be like for you guys as the coaches here if we draft a quarterback at 1, Caleb Williams, and we keep Justin Fields? How do you think that would go? How do you think you would manage those two personalities? How do you think you would manage the pressure and the quarterback controversy and also the reps, the actual on-field stuff? How would you manage a quarterback competition between a number 1 overall pick and the sort of fan favorite incumbent quarterback who we've spent a lot of time trying to build around? And I would imagine this side of the hypothetical is more the case where they're gonna sit down and say, is this something we could do if we wanted to? Like, before they even get to the do we want to do this, let's determine if we think we could do it. And then if we think we could do it, then we can decide whether we would want to and whether that would be worth it to us as an organization. And the answer to both of those questions is most likely no. But I can't help but feel like it is absolutely worth the conversation. And I can't help but see Caleb Williams, and we've talked a little bit about him on the podcast here, and we'll go more in depth in terms of like scouting report and really deep dive analysis on what he presents as a prospect, both good and bad. But when you look at Caleb Williams, and he draws the Patrick Mahomes comparisons that are probably not fair in terms of expectations, but they do some similar types of things sometimes on the football field. And I can't help but think about the year Patrick Mahomes got to sit on the bench behind Alex Smith. And I can't help but feel like the vast majority of quarterbacks coming out of the draft, whether it's Caleb Williams or Drake May or whoever, would benefit from sitting a year on the bench, to be brought along a little bit more slowly instead of being cast right into the starting lineup right away. You've got to be an NFL-ready pro week 1 starting quarterback with not a lot of time to prepare and adjust to the NFL game, but you're thrown into the fire and learn on the fly. And I can't help but feel like, in a vacuum, if we took away all of the noise, right? That the reason why people say you can't do that, right, is because it would be such a distraction and it would be such a big story that we would constantly be asking about Fields and Williams would be breathing down Fields' neck, and it would just be a big distraction and a big problem for the team, right? That's what everybody says. But if you could put that aside for a second, in an ideal world, wouldn't it be nice to have Caleb Williams on the bench, even just for a little bit, just to give him some time? And I've heard people say, okay, do that, but don't make it Justin Fields. Trade Justin Fields, sign Jacoby Brissett, a veteran, some kind of veteran quarterback. I've seen people say start Tyson Bagent, which I don't quite think you could get away with that either. But and sit Caleb Williams. I would love to sit Caleb Williams. I think it would be in your best long-term interest to give him time, not because he's not going to be good if you don't, but because I think it can get him closer to being his best if you do. I think Justin Fields could have benefited from sitting even a little bit more, and we've seen the benefits of that with some other quarterbacks as well. And so I end up being torn a little bit on this 2-quarterback option. We did a whole podcast about it back in December where I floated this idea, and I still like the idea because I think all the reasons why people tell you, no, you can't do this, 90% of them are external, outside of the doors of Hallis Hall in that locker room. It's media pressure, it's attention, it's questions all the time, it's social media, it's all these outside voices and pressures on the Chicago Bears. But a well-run organization, a strong culture, and a strong locker room shouldn't be fazed by the outside pressure. It's only the inside stuff that you should have to worry about in any case. And then specifically in this quarterback case, where there's certainly some inside stuff where you would have players on the team perhaps that support Justin Fields and maybe don't necessarily want Caleb and aren't as on board with that, where it's easier to sell them on it when Justin Fields is out of the building, but when Fields is in the building, will you have, I don't want to say a split in the locker room, but some challenges there. There would definitely be challenges of like, all right, you're the number 1 overall pick and hailed as the future savior of this franchise. And we all know you're just waiting. You're a ticking time bomb to explode and carry this team to the future. And that Justin Fields is essentially just on a leash waiting for his demise. He's in line for the gallows for the execution of his Bears career. It's going to be killed off at some point. And Caleb Williams is going to be killed off, or is going to take over at some point. And Justin Fields is going to be gone. And he knows that's coming. And it's just a matter of time. And he's sort of a lame duck type bridge quarterback there that's not super fair to Justin Fields. And other people point out that if the Bears try to do that, perhaps Justin Fields and his agent would request a trade and hold out and refuse to participate in that arrangement. I don't know that we know that. I think that's a possibility, but doesn't seem exactly quite like Justin Fields' model. But I don't know. He transferred from Georgia to Ohio State. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts that make that challenging. And I agree with 100% that it would be challenging. But people say that it's 100% never going to happen, impossible. I'm not there either. I mean, I think it would be very difficult. But I think if you could make it work, it would be beneficial. And I think there's about a 1 to 5% chance of that ever happening. And I really don't think it's going to happen. But what it does do is it's the Bears saying, oh, we might keep Justin Fields. So, if you want to trade for him, you're going to have to convince us, because otherwise, we'll be happy to just keep him. We'll keep him and Caleb Williams. We don't have to trade him. So, if we can turn down your offer, Pittsburgh, and unless you're going to throw in more draft picks, then maybe we considered it. But we can hold on to Justin. No big deal. Which that part feels like posturing, right? This feels like the Bears put it out there so that other teams maybe might think, oh, maybe they could keep Justin. Maybe they aren't so desperate to get rid of him. Maybe we do have to give up a little bit more to get rid of Fields. And to me, like that's probably where the maximum value of this report comes from. It's probably just that kind of smokescreen trade negotiation stuff and not so much a super real consideration for the Bears. Doesn't mean it's not a valid report from Adam Schefter reporting a real thing that probably was a very real conversation at Halas Hall, just maybe not a conversation that ended up going anywhere. Even Adam Schefter in his report said, as unlikely as it is, the Bears have had those conversations. And that's why we had to make sure we had the conversation about it today. We've also gotten more broad reports about the number 1 overall pick. And in a similar boat, like what it might take the Bears to trade down still from the number 1 overall pick, and perhaps a team like Washington being particularly interested, even beyond the Cliff Kingsbury stuff, of moving up from 2 to 1. So we'll kind of go through how this is being postured more public, how it affects the trade situation, and where there's definitely a lot of smoke here and maybe not a ton of fire next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part, as it sounds, is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So we know Mike Tomlin evidently really likes Justin Fields. We know the Bears have had conversations, quote unquote, about maybe keeping Justin Fields. And now the Bears are also having seemingly conversations about what it would take to still trade down from the number 1 overall pick. I mean, all reports are is that they're planning to draft Caleb Williams, and that I think the latest reporting is that they just want to make sure they get really comfortable with Caleb Williams, the person, but they're in love with Caleb Williams, the football, and they're just going to make sure they really do their whole evaluation and not just fall in love with the football player, but actually make sure that he's the kind of guy they want for the face of their franchise. But that doesn't mean Ryan Poles isn't going to, listen to offers for the number 1 overall pick, right? Like, there's no harm in seeing what Washington or New England or Atlanta or Pittsburgh or the Broncos or the Raiders. No harm in listening if they call and have an offer. Like, you never know if the right package of players could maybe blow you away. Like, there's no advantage for Ryan Poles to put it out there and say, you know what? No. Number 1 pick, untradeable, off the table. We're taking Caleb Williams. End of discussion. Do not call me about the number 1 overall pick. Don't really gain anything from being so definitive about it, especially in early February. I mean, obviously, eventually we get into April and it's kind of like, all right, let's get this show on the road. We know what's happening here. Let's move on and talk about the number 2 overall pick or whatever. But like at this stage of the process, listen up. Take a look at what teams might be willing to offer, because the Bears have made it clear. All right, well, listen, but it's got to be a historic haul, right? Like that's what their Bears are looking for, like more than they got for the number 1 overall pick last year, more than maybe anybody's ever gotten for the number 1 overall pick. Significant amounts of picks to make it worth their while to pass on a quarterback like Caleb Williams that they view as a potential game changer, the kind of quarterback that can blow you away the way Ryan Poles says he needs to be blown away by a quarterback in order to take them. And so the Bears put it out there and say, give us your best offer, right? And that's, again, like they put it out there publicly to encourage all of these other teams. We need a massive haul. We need a historic return for trading this pick. So come give us your historic offers. Like, we'll take a listen. And then you get a team like the Washington Commanders who hires Cliff Kingsbury, and then I think it was Tom Pelissero, it might have been Mike Garafolo, one of the NFL Network insiders, too many insiders with reporting a lot of things about the Bears nowadays. It's hard to keep them all straight, saying that, Washington told Cliff Kingsbury when they hired him that they would do whatever it takes or do, I don't forget the exact wording there. It's like their best off, it would do like their best bet, do like everything within their power to try and get the quarterback that Cliff Kingsbury wants. Now, presumably, Cliff Kingsbury being the USC quarterbacks coach with Caleb Williams, presumably Caleb Williams would be the quarterback that Cliff Kingsbury wants. And the Commanders told Cliff, we'll do whatever we can to try and get the quarterback that you want. So that would presume that they would do whatever they can to try and trade up to the number 1 overall pick with the Chicago Bears. And so what that means and what we've heard the insiders say is the Commanders have to give you the number 2 overall pick plus another first-round pick plus more to move just from 2 to 1. And that it sounds unlikely that Washington will really go all out to really give all that. But at the same time, like, they do want to show Cliff Kingsbury that they tried. And so what that actually looks like for them, we'll see. But it is the team that's right there, the team that has the strongest connections to Caleb Williams. And there was talk too that, okay, if the Bears did that 1-2 swap, that they could trade down again from 2 and get even more picks from another team trying to move up into the top 3 to get the second best quarterback that they want in this draft. Presumably Drake May, but could be Jaden Daniels, or pick your flavor of quarterback in this year's draft. But like that the Bears could kind of double up on historic hauls for quarterback by getting a first and some change from Washington to move down 1, and then get another 2 or 3 first and second round picks from another team, Atlanta, Denver, Las Vegas. A few of these teams that need quarterbacks, the Giants have been in that conversation as well, to move up to 2 and get more first round picks. And all of a sudden you have all these draft picks and maybe even a premium player in that to keep building up your roster and give you the best position, presumably then around Justin Fields, to try and succeed. But like we talked about last week, or maybe it was a couple weeks ago on the podcast now, it's like whatever offer you're trying to go after and get would have to be worth passing on a quarterback that you think can be a franchise quarterback. And what is the price tag on a true franchise quarterback? Like, let's not make Caleb Williams Patrick Mahomes per se, because he's the best quarterback in the NFL. But if we make Caleb Williams Joe Burrow, if we make Caleb Williams Josh Allen, one of these, top tier elite quarterbacks, maybe not greatest of all time, maybe not Hall of Famer. I mean, we don't know if those guys are going to be Hall of Famers or not, but you know what I mean? But like to upper echelon NFL quarterbacks, how many first round picks is that worth? How many first round picks would it take for you to say, you know what? I don't need Joe Burrow. I'll take the draft picks. Because draft picks are great, and you can get a bunch of great players and build a really great roster. But this is a quarterback-driven league. We all know this. I mean, we saw it with the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. We've seen the quarterbacks be the difference makers in all of the biggest games. Like you need, or the biggest advantage you can have, the most important position in football, the most important asset you can have on your team is a true game-changing, playmaking difference maker at the quarterback position. And I don't think there's a set of draft picks you could trade to the Kansas City Chiefs to make them give up Patrick Mahomes. I don't think there's a set of draft picks you could trade to the Cincinnati Bengals to make them give up Joe Burrow, or even the Bills for Josh Allen. Like in the NFL, you're not allowed to trade more than 3 first-round picks anyway. But even if you could trade 5, you could trade 10. Would the Chiefs take 10 first-round picks for Patrick Mahomes? I don't think they would. I really don't think they would. Would the Bengals for Joe Burrow? I don't think so. Like you've got that franchise quarterback. There's no combination of draft picks and players within any kind of salary cap league that you could send to the other team in exchange for that quarterback. I mean, unless you could trade them DJ Moore and Cole Kmet and Montez Sweat and Jalen Johnson and Jaquan Brisker. And you trade them most of your roster and all of your draft picks, and maybe they'd give up that quarterback. But like it's not allowed in the NFL. So like there's not really a trade you could make under current NFL rules that would be enough for any of those teams to get rid of those quarterbacks. And so if you're Ryan Poles and you believe Caleb Williams is one of those quarterbacks, there's no amount of picks and players that can move you off of that. Now, if you don't believe Caleb Williams is that quarterback, or maybe you're 60% sure or 70% sure Caleb Williams is that quarterback, then is there a combination of players and picks that can move you off? Maybe. But I would tell the rest of the NFL it would take a historic haul. It would take a historic draft compensation to move me off of Caleb Williams. And that's where Ryan Poles is now. That's where I think this team is. They look at Caleb and say, listen, he's not a sure thing. We don't know for sure that he's going to be Mahomes or Burrow or Allen. But say we're, again, 60% sure, 70% sure he can become Mahomes or Burrow or Allen or whoever. You have to give me something to make up for that 30%, right? That like, okay, I will take that 30% of the time he might not work, and so I'll take all the draft picks and those 30% odds as opposed to keeping the quarterback and my 70% odds. And if it's greater than 50%, I'm not really moving off of that spot. Like every quarterback has some kind of percentage there, and it's all sort of a hypothetical number there. But like, I think they're mostly convinced Caleb can be that guy, and so you'd have to give them something super, super convincing to make them say, okay, you know what, Caleb is still a risk, and these draft picks are a better deal than the risk, whatever risk percentage that is for Caleb, that we're going to take those picks. It's not going to happen. The Bears are going to draft Caleb Williams and are going to trade Justin Fields. Those are the overwhelmingly most likely outcomes for this roster moving forward this offseason. I'm already starting to get tired of talking about it, and I'm really going to try not to talk about it every day in the podcast here for the next few weeks or whatever. Like, we're going to talk about the NFL Combine coming up. We're going to talk a lot about free agency. We're going to talk about the other draft pick the Bears have in the first round. The 9th overall pick is not something we spent a lot of time talking about, but want to get into some of that stuff as well. So we're not just going to do Caleb and Justin talk every single day. Today, I just wanted to round up. We had like 3 or 4 or 5 different reports on this. So I was like, all right, let's, instead of doing 3 or 4 different 5 separate podcasts, the Steelers podcast with Mike Tomlin, and then the Keep Both Quarterbacks podcast, and then the Historic Hall podcast. It's like, no, let's do quick hitters on all 3, condense it into one podcast, and then move on with our life for a couple weeks, and hopefully not have to talk about these quarterbacks again for at least a little while. So that's why you got to subscribe to Locked On Bears to get some non-Bears quarterback talk coming in the very near future. Follow along in the Locked On Bears YouTube channel as well. Either way, you're going to get daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Go back and check out yesterday's podcast. We did a different style of Locked On Bears, going through a narrative about Shane Waldron, getting to know Shane Waldron as the Bears offensive coordinator, because the Bears have not formally introduced Shane Waldron yet, even though they announced his hiring, but he hasn't had a press conference yet. And so I combed through literally hours of previous Shane Waldron interviews and press conferences, plus interviews and press conferences of Sean McVay, Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Drew Lock, Dave Canales, and some others, to pull quotes and kind of go through what is Shane Waldron bringing the Chicago Bears, who is Shane Waldron, what is his coaching philosophy. I worked a lot on that podcast. It took a lot of time, and I've gotten a bunch of really nice comments about it on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, so I appreciate the good feedback. But if you haven't listened to it, like if you listen to one Locked On Bears podcast, I guess you already listened to this one. So if you listen to a second Locked On Bears podcast, go back and listen to that one, because I'm really proud of it and put a lot of work into it, and I think it turned out really, really well. Coming back tomorrow, we'll keep you up to date on any and all big Bears news and updates. We're going to have some guests joining us in the next couple of weeks, and then I'm headed to the NFL Combine at the end of the month as well to get up close and personal with Matt Eberflus, Ryan Poles, and some of these Bears draft prospects as well. So lots of goodies coming your way. And of course, every day, we're going to make sure you get another opportunity to bear down.